Nobody knows what day it is, but we do know it's time for another episode of Real True Facts, the realest, truest podcast out there. I'm Barbara Eden.
And I am John Cheever. Not that one.
Hey, John.
Good afternoon, good morning, good evening.
Hello again. I was thinking we should probably begin the show before we get any farther. Begin it with a disclaimer. I think this episode is not suitable for children or those faint of heart.
Right. Unless you want to educate your children regarding the truth and the facts of the world. But I think it is safe to say that if you're, faint of heart, if you're likely to faint or die from hearing scary, spooky things, this is just a friendly disclaimer.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. We're talking about Poltergeist today. It is a very scary episode. Sometimes we do the spooky stuff, but I don't think we've ever done anything that is truly scary. And so I think this is going to be that show today. So we are talking all about poltergeists. Yes, those poltergeists, those moody little ghosts. They like to throw things around and poke you and make your furniture float. That is what we're going to get into today.
Yeah, I think our audience, our listeners and viewers really do like the spooky stuff. And so I think it has its place. And it's a good time to talk about, this specific type of ghost entity. Maybe we'll figure out what to call it later in this episode.
Yeah, we'll figure all that out. Ask and ye shall receive. Listeners, we are here for you today. We're going to do some scary poltergeists.
So this week we do have a really interesting guest, the medium Miss Eleanor Darkness. You've probably heard of her. She's one of the most prolific mediums in the U.S. and likely the world. I can't necessarily speak for that because I haven't been in a lot of other places discussing ghosts.
Well, we are very lucky to have her today. I know she has assisted on many high-profile cases in Southern California. She's assisted with law enforcement. Sometimes when they need help on cold cases, they will bring in mediums to assist in that and solve those cases. She is a skilled essayist as well.
Oh, wow. I didn't know that. I knew she wrote things, but I didn't necessarily know, about essays. So that does sound extra interesting.
It does. We'll talk about a few of her essays with her.
Fortunately, we have Dr. Semor here this week to hopefully give us that scientific foundation, before we delve into the paranormal.
That's always good. We're happy to have him back again this week.
Right. But first.
And now it's time for
Real True Fiction. So this is a new segment, and what we really this goes back to our ongoing public service that we do to separate what's true and what's not for folks. And one common phrase that I use for this is hiding in plain sight.
Yeah.
So there are a lot of fictional works that we don't know which parts are true and which parts aren't. So first of all, you may remember a little movie called Back to the Future and its sequel, Back to the Future 2. While time travel itself is fairly ridiculous, the hoverboards, as seen in Back to the Future Part 2, everyone knew they were real. And then the film industry and the government tried to tell us they weren't real, even though we had them right there on screen. And the name even came back more recently with things with wheels being called hoverboards. But as it turns out, it's a fact that hoverboards have and do exist.
Do you think the ones with wheels, that was sort of like an attempt at rebranding to get people to not pay attention to the real hoverboards?
Oh, of course. Yeah. There were Segway. They basically said, let's take the handle off a Segway and keep people forgetting about the real hoverboards. Mm-hmm. Yes, I think that's a really good point.
Yeah. Well, I've got one too, if we're talking about all that stuff.
Mm-hmm.
The movie District 9.
Okay.
That is also something that the government is trying to cover up. Bug aliens. They're real and they are here. And if you get infected, you become one. It's happening now. I mean, look at all the bugs we have in the world. Look at the murder hornets.
Sure.
I think that they're big because they used to be people.
Right. That stuff doesn't just magically appear. It doesn't come out of a vacuum.
No.
So that's a really interesting example. People think, oh, well, that's a bit outlandish and strange. Maybe it's a metaphor for something. But as it turns out, yeah, I like that. And that's really interesting.
Yeah.
I have another one for you. And we definitely have the Hollywood feel this week because Hollywood's a great propaganda machine.
Yeah.
But have you heard of the film Armageddon?
I think I've seen it a few times.
Right. So, it's part of the disaster series, but the government would, fictionalize the case and would lead us to believe that it's only fiction, that they use ragtag teams of miners to shoot out into space and destroy comets. They would want you to believe that that's fiction,
Right.
But we're here to tell you that it's not. It's one of their greatest tools in their arsenal.
Well, you know the saying, oh, you can't write that stuff.
They can't.
You can't write that stuff.
Right.
How would they know to write it if it wasn't true?
Yeah, we know those Hollywood movie makers and creative types. They can't come up with something like that.
Yeah, no, they're not. They're sitting around in a room being like, oh, it'd be cool if they blew up a comet. It's like, I don't know.
Yeah, wouldn't it be cool if, how about reality?
Yeah, no one ever starts a sentence with, wouldn't it be cool if? It's like it either is or it isn't. Like, come on. Well, keeping with the space thing, I'm just going to throw that one out there. Apollo 13.
Okay, good space movie, I believe.
Yeah, it is a good space movie. I know that it was a dramatization of the actual Apollo 13 mission. They were supposed to go to the moon, but they didn't because an oxygen tank exploded 2 days into the mission. They ended up looping around the moon and coming home. But in the movie, they fixed the leak with duct tape.
Okay, yes, I do remember that.
And I believe that the trueness of all of that is that NASA depends on duct tape for all kinds of critical functions, but they hide it.
Okay. You know what? When we reveal these truths, it's like, the pieces fall into place and you go, oh, you just, that sigh of knowing and knowledge of, that makes so much sense. Why didn't I think of that before?
They want us to think it's all these smart scientists and engineers hanging out, building these really cool things with solar panels and telescopes and all this stuff. But really, it's all just held together with duct tape.
Yeah, and that totally makes sense when you say it. Like, I get it.
Yeah.
I have a third one here. I'll bring it back down to earth. Yeah. The Fast and the Furious series. There have been, I don't know how many, a dozen of these movies now, and every single one of them is ridiculous. Yeah. Not unlike Armageddon. And that's a really devious tactic that Hollywood uses to make us think that street racers make excellent secret agents.
Why wouldn't they? They know how to drive fast. They can get away from stuff.
They have street cred. They can move. Right. They're agile. They're nimble. They're not almost always. They're always good looking, which we learned last week makes you more trustworthy.
If you are good looking, we trust you.
Right. So the government does utilize street racers frequently to infiltrate other gangs, other organizations, crime, you name it. They're using street racers to infiltrate.
Yeah, they are using really good-looking people to get these jobs done. And case in point, the last one I have today is Gattaca. You look at good-looking people, you can't look past genetic engineering.
Right.
That is real. If we just look at our own bodies, that's all the proof we need. Like the appendix. The appendix used to have a purpose, but it doesn't anymore. It's been made obsolete through science. And just like in the movie, like Ethan Hawke did, he wanted to transform himself into a better person. You literally have to transform yourself into a better person. Like, I think everyone was okay with how they looked until that movie came out. And then after that, everyone was like, well, I can have surgery for this. I can elongate my shins, which I think actually was the first instance of shin elongation was shown in that movie. So it's like a documentary.
So the government or the powers that be, the government and some of the organizations don't want us to realize that to better yourself, you have to physically better yourself?
Yeah. They don't want us to know. They want you to feel okay with who you are. What a load of crap that is. If you're not happy, you can change whatever you want.
Wow. That, again, it's like the veil is being lifted.
Yeah. Wake up. So we were talking about poltergeist today, and just a little background on that word. I don't want to step on Dr. Seymour's toes. We'll bring him in a little bit, but I did my own little research here. Poltergeist is a German word for noisy ghost.
Okay.
Yeah, and they have been here since the dawn of time. I like to think that poltergeists are like the toddler ghosts because they tend to throw tantrums and be very volatile. There is some thought that people think that poltergeists cause memory lapses or daydreams. So if you're feeling super spacey, it's probably ghosts. And I tend to blame all of my shortcomings on ghosts anyway. So that works out for me. There have been very famous cases of poltergeists, like the Bell Witch of Tennessee, which inspired the Blair Witch Project.
Sure.
The Einfeld Poltergeist and the Amityville Horror. Those are also really popular movies as well, which, as we know from the last segment, movies are always true. But I think my favorite is Jeff the Talking Mongoose, which is also an instance of a poltergeist.
Now, I have to admit, I am not familiar with that one.
Yeah, so Jeff, which was spelled G-E-F, Jeff.
So is this in Canada or something?
It was in the Isle of Man.
Okay, so I assume that's the same thing as Canada.
Yeah, it's Gaelic. Either one.
If it's not the United States, I'm assuming it's probably Canada or... Yeah, that's okay. I'm with you. I follow. So Jeff the mongoose.
Jeff the Talking Mongoose. It was a mongoose in the 1930s named Jeff. And this family of farmers believed that this mongoose was talking to them and giving them all sorts of information, helping them wake up in the morning. And we actually have a quote from Jeff that they said that Jeff told them, I am a freak. I have hands and I have feet, and if you saw me, you'd faint. You'd be petrified, mummified, turned into stone, or a pillar of salt.
Okay, wow. So almost biblical talking mongoose.
Yeah,
ghost.
I mean, the mongoose came with a threat.
Yeah, and it's and that's hard to say. If hands and feet, so maybe it was a human poltergeist inside of a mongoose. Well, these questions are adding up.
Yeah, there could be possessions.
Dr. Semor and Miss Eleanor Darkness.
Yes.
These interspecies ghosts and everything. That's a cool definition and primer. Maybe we should try and look into the science of this?
We should right now.
Do we have to bring in Dr. Semor? Do you need to hack the?
Here we go. Hacking the mainframe.
I got nervous for a second.
Sorry, there's a bit of a lag down in the bunker. Okay, you should be here. Dr. Semor, are you here?
I am here. It's good to hear from you, John and Barbara.
That's a relief. I was worried for a second.
Yeah, especially with the bunker lag, as we call it in the business.
Thick walls.
Right. A lot of concrete. Dr. Semor, so we're talking about poltergeist this week, and as you may have heard, Barbara had some interesting definitions to get us started. While she says it's a kind of ghost, maybe we should backtrack even further. What is, scientifically speaking, what is a ghost anyway?
Well, a ghost falls under the realm of what we would traditionally call parapsychology, and I do have PhDs in psychology and parapsychology.
Oh yeah,
that's right.
Yeah.
So
sometimes I forget.
It is an unknown, or excuse me, not unknown. I'm comfortable with that unknown psychic phenomenon that relates to a person's physical, mental, emotional, or sexual experiences.
Okay.
And something that is not necessarily perceived by all people in the same way, but can be sensed by one or more persons.
Okay. Yeah, that's clear as day now.
Yeah.
So, and it seems like perception is a big part of this. So I'm really glad we have a medium on today, because I personally can't perceive a poltergeist that I'm aware of in an effective or efficient way.
So you've never had an encounter?
I don't know. It's one of those things where I'm not sure because I haven't developed that communication. So it's, I've certainly had my, I would say, fair share, but even greater than a fair share, like a substantial share of weird stuff.
Yeah. Well, maybe we can ask Eleanor how we can develop those abilities within ourselves, if in fact you do want to make contact.
Right. That's a good question in itself.
Yeah.
And I'm really interested to hear from Eleanor as well as from the scientific perspective to learn a little bit more about how to record the data that would be useful for the scientific community.
Yeah, data collection is a huge part of science. Yeah.
Right. So, I mean, we keep talking about her. Why don't we just bring her on, huh?
I know. We're just like, man, I can't wait till she gets here. It's like, man, she's already here. So why don't we welcome Eleanor Darkness? I'll just say our guest today really needs no introduction. Like we said earlier, she has assisted on many high-profile cases all over the country. Her essay on psychic closure after death inspired the Jennifer Love Hewitt TV show Ghost Whisperer. So please give us a real true facts welcome to Eleanor Darkness.
Salutations, my children.
Oh.
Hello, great to have you. This is exciting to speak to a real medium. First, I'll be selfish. Plural of medium, is it media or mediums?
Medii.
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 We refer to it as medii, yes. But there are many other names that we can go by.
Okay. Yeah, you guys, seem like a pretty down-to-earth, flexible group.
Yeah.
You don't seem like you get offended if someone used the wrong kind of plural. But,
As a matter of fact, I do take offense to the term down to earth. I like to think that I'm far more ethereal. I travel through many earths, but yes, as you are trying to ensue, I do allow for many names to encompass my being.
That's a good point. I apologize for that.
That's a good point.
Yeah, I do. Yeah, I'll try and I'll apologize ahead of time. I certainly do not mean offense. I'm just a little old-fashioned and still have a lot of learning to do. That's why you're here, right?
Yes, I'm here to teach everyone. Thank you, John, for your apology, but I'm also here to educate, so consider that your first lesson.
We are all students. So.
Great, I'm already learning. This is exciting.
So, Eleanor, thank you for joining us today. We really just want to walk through what it means to be a medium, because we're talking about ghosts, we're talking about making contact, but I know a medium has to do, and correct me if I'm wrong, with bringing the messages from the other side to the world of the living in order to communicate something from someone who has passed. Am I correct in that assumption?
Yes, Barbara, you're very accurate in your assumption there. I live for bringing messages both from the beyond and from the current to the beyond. I am one to communicate.
Okay, so that's a good point. Yeah, so it's not necessarily from the beyond only one direction. It's not just the beyond back here, but it's also here to the beyond.
Yes, as I hope that you and your family members have experienced in my delightful television show that is based after my life, Ghost Whisperer, I communicate with humans to tell them what the beyond says to them, but simultaneously what the humans need to say to the beyond.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. So if I had something that I needed to say to a loved one that had passed on, you would be able to communicate that message to them?
If they're open to it, yes.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so going piggybacking on Dr. Semor's question, are there ways to kind of record these communications, or what's the best way to kind of keep track of them and maybe record them or analyze them for future use or something like that?
I am a strong supporter of journaling. Journaling is a very, very unique tool when it comes to communicating with the beyond. There's a lot of script that you receive from the beyond that manifests in your journal, and that is a wonderful way of documentation. But it also really helps if you're very high when it happens.
Mm.
Okay. So, yeah, I like the idea of the traditional old-fashioned, you can call it old-fashioned, but I think it's still a current way of just writing things down, because then you don't have interference from things like tape recorders. And
well, I know there's like automatic writing where you just
Yes.
like scribble and then the spirit flows through you and they give you the messages that way?
Yes, scrying is what we refer to it. Yes, you are a squire to the medium world, so we refer to it as squiring.
To the meteor world. That makes sense.
So what? Oh, so go ahead.
I was just going to say, so, Barbara mentioned you were an essayist. So, I mean, does that mean a lot of your writings then become essays, or is that how that generally works? Is that where your essays come from this journaling or scrying?
Yes, if you will actually look, many of my doctoral pieces, I credit the people from the beyond that have influenced said writing. So there are a lot of co-authors on a lot of my doctoral work because I have the influence of others who are helping to elevate my education to those around me.
So we should actually be calling you Dr. Eleanor Darkness.
I prefer Miss. I am still single.
Yes. Oh, okay.
You gotta put that out there somehow, right?
Do what you gotta
do. That's what I would do if I could. But I don't have a lot of company down here in the bunker.
Hey, get it where you can. That's what I say. Miss Eleanor, I do want to ask, because we know all about your credentials and all of the wonderful work that you've done. But for those out there that maybe don't know what it really means to be a medium, can you take us through maybe your origin story or just an instance that made you think, oh man, like I'm a medium, like I have to use these gifts. Like what is an instance of that you can you tell us?
I mean, there were many instances within my childhood that gave me an inkling to my connection, but it wasn't until my teen years after puberty things really became apparent. I have been in the profession for 13 years now, but as I've learned throughout my profession, many other lifetimes have I actually participated in this connection to the spiritual world. But roughly 13 years ago, I was on a family trip and I snuck off with my younger brother and we smoked some reefer. And when I came back to the hotel room, I realized that we were on sacred ground and that there had been many other lives that had lived there. And suddenly I was having conversations with other individuals who had partaken in inhabiting that particular place. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So that was one experience. Then after that experience, you had greater than an inkling. You realized, okay, I'm a medium, and I want to explore this gift and actually develop it and use it for the greater good.
Yes. After that one particular instance, I realized that I had to start communicating with the other realm and finding other various means of doing so. And that is when I started traveling to the many graveyards within our community so that I could sit and spend the afternoon journaling. And that is when I realized that I had the power to become a squire. And from there, many other turns and twists developed, but those were two main catalysts in my younger years.
Did that scare you at all? I know that the times, because I have had some ghostly encounters, the times that I have encountered those ghosts and knowing that I can speak to these things have terrified me. Did that scare you at all when you first had that encounter?
Oh, goodness, no. As I mentioned, I grew up with a younger brother. He scared the crap out of me growing up. Anything to deal with the afterlife was much, much better.
Mm-hmm. Well, I was an only child, so I'm actually a pretty jumpy person. I didn't really have anybody to run interference off of.
So this kind of it reminds me of the question we brought up earlier. Can you develop these skills, or maybe or sharpen them? So since your first experience, do you feel like you've honed these skills further? Through these 13 years, and or do you feel like it once it's on, it's something you can't really learn? It's just a gift.
With any practice of any muscle that you use, there is a repetition that you can help to grow said muscle. However, as I said, smoking reefer, real key way of like dialing in. So I've talked to many people that after their first time smoking weed, they get extremely paranoid. But if you lean into that, it's actually other worlds pressing down on you, trying to infiltrate you. So if you can learn to live through the paranoia, you can actually have a very graceful interaction.
So yeah, that really goes back to Native Americans have used mind altering, peyote, and even the marijuana throughout the years to open up to new worlds. And now we have some of the more recent generations speaking on MDMA and some other chemicals that expand your mind and open up your mind to new experiences. So it sounds like this is a bit in tune with that, and it's a way to kind of bring down the defenses and your normal human wall that you put up to kind of let spirits in and out.
Well, I know after a couple of drinks, I'm like seeing auras and stuff, so that might have something to do with it.
Okay. I have personally, yeah.
Another alternative to marijuana is that I've noticed the younger generation has started using sage, and sage is a delightful way to hotbox a room to really drive in those energies. But please use white sage. Black sage only brings in the darkness, and you do not want that.
Okay, so is this the same sage that you cook with? I apologize for my ignorance. I'm really not. I'm not familiar with the sage. Is this?
Yes. Yes, and it is the same sage that you cook with, and I have a delicious pumpkin pasta recipe that I can send to you that utilizes sage. However, it is also a dried out version that you can ignite, and it causes a wonderful swell of white smoke.
Okay, that makes sense then. And as our viewers and listeners know, we do love recipes.
Yes, those scones that Lauren J sent us, those were fantastic. So please send us recipes. We love those.
Yeah, we do love recipes on real true facts. And speaking of recipes, maybe we should. I guess it's not speaking of recipes at all, but I was saying right now might be a time for a quick break to take a breather. I guess what I'm saying is I need a breather after all this talk of food.
Sure, let's take a quick little break. We'll come back with more of Acclaimed Medium, Eleanor Darkness, and our science guru, Dr. Semor.
And we're back after that quick break. I needed to get that little rest in after talk of recipes. But this week we're talking about poltergeists with our medium, Miss Eleanor Darkness, and of course our resident in-house science expert, Dr. Semor. So, we're talking about developing these skills, and it's almost like muscle memory. But I am going to kind of circumvent normal podcast rules and mention something that was talked about off air. Barbara and Eleanor were talking about some kind of story about a hotel or something, and I have no idea what this is, so I'm just going to bring it right up because I'm so curious.
Oh yeah.
Are you comfortable sharing that? I don't know what it is you're sharing, Miss Eleanor, but I'm so curious. I'd like to know if that's possible.
So yes, as we've been mentioning poltergeist, there are many different variations to what a poltergeist is, whether it be an apparition, a bogey, a banshee, a demon, a doppelganger, spiritual being, hobgoblin. There are many different manifestations. And to do with this hotel experience that I had as of late, I was on my latest book tour. I was traveling around town, and my VW bus broke down. And I had to take up a residence for the evening in a abandoned hotel. It wasn't entirely abandoned. There was still a gentleman there. He was the caretaker of the grounds, and he offered me a room for the night, but he made it very well known that I was the only entity that was staying there. He had mentioned that throughout the years that there had been a couple of different ghost hunters that had come through. Obviously, he saw the side of my van that's very beautifully spray painted with my face on it, holding my latest book.
Oh, cool.
Yes, it is very rock and roll. And so he mentioned that there have been many different people who have come through and have mentioned and to do investigations. And at the time I was standing there, I felt no inkling, and I thought that it was written up to, roadside hick sort of culture. And as I was led to my room, I began feeling a sensation that I had never felt before. It was something that was very foreign to me. And so I was being led up to my room, and there were 4 separate structures on the property. There was the main house, and then there was what was there used to be the carriage house and the servants' quarters, and all these things had been made up at one point in time to be a hotel, but at this point had been very decrepit and very, just demolished in the natural sense. He took me up to the 2nd floor, which I thought was very unsafe, but nonetheless, we climbed the stairs. He led me into my room. So as I'm sitting there and I'm putting my hair into rollers and I have on my beautiful vintage nightgown and I'm sitting there watching the cooking channel,
Sure.
suddenly, the TV goes to maximum volume and cuts off. And it was very startling. But then the roar of the most monstrous AC unit began to echo throughout the room. And I've never been approached with such animosity before. Everything has always been from such a positive standpoint, but there was just such venom behind the emotions that I was feeling.
Right. Such venom behind this air conditioner, right?
My goodness. The roar that it let out was something that I yelped for myself. But I took a deep breath and I reminded myself that if something needs to contact me, it'll find a way to do so, and I need to adjust myself to allow for the contact. But nothing ever came. As I'm laying there in my curlers attempting to fall asleep, the roar of the air conditioner ceases. And that began to startle me, but I didn't have a chance to come to full startleization until the armoire began shaking as if there was an entity inside. And at that point, I said, oh, no. And I put on my Fredericks of Hollywood little slippers, and I flung open the door, and I went running down to the caretaker's cottage, and I began banging on the door, and I said, I am not putting up with this. I don't know what kind of hoax this hotel is putting on, but this is not okay, because no entity has actually attempted to contact me. They're merely scaring me, and this is not acceptable. So the caretaker comes downstairs, and as he is walking me back to my hotel room, he begins to explain to me that the hotel has recently been bought by some Haitians, and that they are trying to implement their beliefs on everything, and it is not going over well. And I was startled by this information because I could not believe that such spiritual people would be going about this in such a harmful manner and not communicating with the spirits, instead just trying to push upon their religion. And that was very startling information to me. So when you go back up.
So the new owners, instead of working with the entities, they were trying to push it out, and they were receiving some negative feedback from the ghosts.
Precisely. And I'm a very communicative person. I believe that communities need to work together in order for the best outcome. And hearing this very abrasive approach was very startling to me. He walks me back up to the room. He double checks the armoire. There's nothing inside of it. It was very unsettling. I felt for the first time as if I was crazy. And I know for a fact that cannot be the truth.
Oh, you're a doctor.
Precisely. Miss, please call me Miss.
Miss Doctor.
And so the caretaker leaves, and I began to settle down, and I almost began to chuckle at the entire scenario. But that's when I began to hear the voices, both in the room next door to me, which, again, he has made quite clear that I'm the only person here. And that is when I look over and I see the mingling group of individuals that all have hollow, sunken faces. And remember, I'm in a very small town. There's not much going on here. So I see a group of individuals that are talking very quickly and have very sunken faces. And I'm very, very just put off by the entire scenario. And I force myself to go to sleep. And the next thing I know, it's morning, the birds are chirping, everything is beautiful. And as I pack my belongings and I load up my VW bus with my beautiful face airbrushed on the side, that is when I start to see all the hoodoo and voodoo artifacts that are around the hotel.
Wow.
And so, yes, it was incredibly jarring because I still, as a professional, cannot chalk up to what the entire scenario meant. But I definitely did some journaling, and as I was doing the journaling post haste at the coffee shop down the street, there was a young girl who appeared in the journaling, and she told me, "Please never return. This is not a safe place."
Wow.
After the fact, many years later, I did have a colleague whom I was recounting the story to, and he himself is a paranormal investigator, and he is the one to get involved in the knickknacks and the technology and whatnot. And I would say that he has encountered quite a few interesting things. But he went back to the hotel and he did his own investigation, and he said it was one of the most active locations that he had ever been a part of. Paul Roberts of Ghostwatch Paranormal.
That's interesting that you bring up the technology. I'd like to ask Dr. Semor about the thoughts behind that technology. What do those? Because we hear about like ghost meters and EVP recordings. Like, Dr. Semor, what is that actually recording? What is the technology behind that, and how can that help us understand something like a poltergeist better?
Well, there's several different technologies, and all of them are about sensing what is outside of our normal senses. So when we look on the sky after a rainy day, when the sun comes out, we see the beautiful colors of the rainbow. But beyond that are ultraviolet and infrared, and those are types of electromagnetic radiation that our eyes cannot sense, but can be picked up by meters, and levels of energy that we have connected to but cannot prove are directly a result of ghosts, phantoms, poltergeists, spirits, specters, etc. Similarly, there is those volumes and in terms of decibels, but also frequencies and wavelengths of sound above and below the sonic, supersonic, subsonic sounds that we can connect similarly.
That makes sense. So it seems like we use these tools that, things our eyes can't see. We use video cameras or still cameras, and that's why we have, photos of ghosts or spirits. And then we use audio recorders to capture sounds that our ears can't hear at the time, and then analyze them later and look at them later. So that's I'm beginning to kind of understand. It goes back to perception. We're using these tools to perceive things that the human body can't quite perceive.
I'll ask Eleanor and I'll ask Dr. Semor. Why are the spirits here? What do they want from us? Do they mean to scare us so much? Because so many of these stories, people are just terrified. What is the purpose of that?
Dr. Semor, I'll let you go first.
There's lots of different understandings in the field of parapsychology. Carl Jung, who's a famous psychologist, goes back and was a colleague of Freud's, was one of the first to bring the paranormal beliefs into the mainstream. And it was about an explanation for the unexplainable. People have always looked to the heavens for one of those explanations. And in this case, it's about making once a being reaches that understanding, crying out with the answer to share with others.
That is a very astute observation. I very much like that medical insight. In my understanding and my experience, it is that people are just far too paranoid to let that realm open up into positivity, and people need to give into that sense of fear in order to understand the positive sense of outcome.
So it's almost as if they reach. Why are what are they doing and why? It's they get there and they're just trying to communicate. It sounds like it's almost like the question, well, what are we doing here? That's a pretty big whopper.
That's a deep one,
right? That's a big juicy one, and so the ghosts. I think maybe they don't know and we don't know, but I think a good explanation is what we're experiencing is them trying to communicate, and sometimes it scares the bejesus out of us, and sometimes if maybe you're more attuned or comfortable, you just say, oh geez, they're trying to tell me they're dead.
Another way is that those of the other realm are accustomed to their normalities as human beings. And so a lot of times when you do have an interaction, it's going to be in a place like a mall or something where the entities are just going back to what they know.
Mm-hmm.
Just like a human. We we do what we know.
They're just repeating actions that they've done before. I agree with you on that. I have only had one ghost encounter, and I believe it was multiple ghosts trying to tell me something. And I think I was there maybe, excuse me, as someone who was able to listen to their message and help them either cross over, or they knew I was someone that would actually listen. I think a lot of people, like we've said, have been closed off to messages. And I think in that particular time I was open to receive the message, and so I was just sort of bombarded. It's like when you're alone for so long and you finally find someone to talk to, it's like you're just word vomiting. You want to tell them everything.
That is exactly right.
Yeah.
Sure. So one thing I want to maybe take a look at is poltergeists in the media and television and film, because that seems to be one of the biggest outlets, that exposure. And so I'd like to get, Miss Eleanor Darkness's take on what, maybe what's real and what isn't. That's a big part of Real True Facts, what's fiction and what's fact. So I think that'll, maybe we should take a look at that after a quick break.
Yeah, we'll take a little break. We'll be right back with more Eleanor Darkness. We are back again with our guest, Eleanor Darkness, famous, incredibly gorgeous medium. She is here today talking about her experiences with the other side and how it pertains to our topic today of poltergeists. So before the break, we were talking a little bit about what instances in film and TV, multimedia, could be real, as far as the depictions of ghosts and the paranormal.
I think that's really important, because it's probably what we're most familiar with, the most exposure we've had, and we need the experts like Miss Eleanor Darkness and Dr. Semor to help wade us through these waters and guide us to the truth. I'll start right off the top, the movie Poltergeist, right? So, it seems real enough to me, in simple terms, Miss Eleanor, yay or nay? Yay,
absolutely yay. Southern California is just steaming.
I knew it. It seemed too visceral to be fictional.
This is very true. However, for as real as the movie Poltergeist is, it is vaguely based on another film called The Entity, which is about a horribly aggressive entity that terrorized a family in Culver City back in the 70s.
Oh.
And that, and what you're saying is that actually happened, didn't it?
Yes, that is 100% a factual case. One of my mentors, who has worked closely with the FBI for years, worked with the professor that created the chamber that caught the entity.
Wow. That's a whole episode in itself. Kind of law enforcement. We need to take a note of that.
We do.
Really yes, all the very married men in law enforcement. Yes, we can talk about that for days.
Sure.
We'll find you a boyfriend one of these days. I want to ask, I know Amityville is true. I know that the exorcism of Emily Rose, that's true.
Yes, but her name was actually Emily Ross.
Oh, okay.
Yep, and I'm guessing it just it was either a copyright thing or they just thought it wouldn't be as popular. What are more people gonna see, right? Emily Rose or Emily Ross?
Yeah,
exactly.
Everyone
has to name these days,
right? Go ahead. Sorry.
And then I want to ask, though, like a franchise like the Annabelle franchise.
So Annabelle, we're talking about the doll, correct?
Yeah, the doll. Yeah.
Yes.
I don't know if it's a haunted doll or a possessed doll, but it seems like this doll shows up at all these, in all these places, and bad things happen.
Yes. So what Ed and Lorraine Warren have gone through as far as the Annabelle manifestation is quite jarring. I mean, as we all know, Ed and Lorraine were some of the most in tuned individuals when it comes to paranormal activity. It was quite a lot for them to deal with.
Yeah. Speaking of in tune, my next question was actually going to be about the Warrens, and you read my mind, so to speak. So the Warrens, then you already answered my question. They are not only the real deal, but they're in fact pillars in the field, is what you're saying.
Yes, they are undisputable, just like wonderful people that truly have a gift within themselves.
Okay, wow. All right, so I want to put something to Dr. Semor. Are you still with us?
Yeah, I'm right here. Yes.
So I'm just gonna almost like a hypothetical. So I'm going to hire you to conduct an experiment, and I come to you as not, I know you're not an exorcist or that type, and I say, listen, I have this possessed or haunted doll that keeps showing up where people die, where houses become haunted, poltergeists appear. And I'm like, listen, I don't believe in all this mumbo jumbo. I want science to tell me what's actually going on. What might be your first step as far as, I'm going to take out this instrument and conduct this test?
Well, yes. What we would do is we'd isolate one variable at a time. We would try to first, as you said, thinking about the doll, well, what factors can we remove to isolate that it's the doll itself, and then see, is it the doll in a certain location? Because as we all know, in parapsychology, this extrasensory, these kinesthetic experiences are not something to take lightly, but they often come along with so many feelings and experiences. You would try to place the doll in a more sterile environment and see if a person experiences that, and then try to move on to the next person. Try to
Exactly. Okay, I get it. Yeah, so we would, take out all the other variables, take this doll, put it in a laboratory, controlled environment, and then introduce a person, a person, a subject, and then record the observations. And that's really interesting. That's a really good starting point, because we've eliminated all this exterior stuff, all this extraneous stuff, and now we have a good starting point to base tests on and procedures and that kind of thing. I just wanted kind of a layperson's introduction to our thought process for me. So that was
wow. And I don't think we want to eliminate what Miss Eleanor said earlier about we don't want to make it too sterile. We do still want to allow that subject to journal afterwards.
So the scientific merit of journaling. Okay, cool. Yeah, I think that's something to keep in mind. The scientific merit of journaling. So I know we're talking about media and film, TV, books, and things. But before I forget, I have to ask you, Miss Eleanor Darkness, is there one particular case that you have worked on, that you've been a part of, that's really stuck with you? And if you have to change names or events to protect those involved, I completely understand. Or if you have to say, well, it's the Bamityville house or something.
As a matter of fact, yes, there is one particular case, and this will be my first time ever talking about it publicly.
Wow. Cool.
There was a group of French students that were traveling to the U.S., and they were on flight 801. And this one particular individual experienced their first sort of inkling towards paranormal premonition. And it did not bode well for those involved in the slightest. However, there was one girl who survived after it was all said and done, she survived the incident. And while she had voluntarily checked herself into a mental institution, she and I had a lot of conversations, and it was a very, very jarring circumstance. And I took her experience and, pardon the pun, I was a ghostwriter on the screenplay.
Wow.
So
Because I know your new book is an oral history of ghost encounters. So I know you're talking to a lot of different individuals who have had these encounters. Is she in your new book?
I cannot confirm nor deny that, but if you look at chapter 13, there might be some instances.
Ooh, so yeah, Barbara, you're gonna have to read that and tell me about it.
Oh, you know I read everything.
Right, and yeah, and I'm not much with the words, literally speaking. So I don't want to overstep or overstate your involvement, Miss Eleanor Darkness, but I mean, is it appropriate to say that you saved this young person's life?
Oh, no, she's deceased.
Oh.
No. But I did have a wonderful interaction with her while she was still alive. We still have the occasional conversation while she's crossed over on the other side, but it's more so that she can tell me about whether or not an ingredient's going to work in a new recipe.
Oh, how lovely.
So some good did come of it.
Oh, good is everywhere that you look. You just have to be able to look past the bad.
Yeah, let's talk more about that. We'll start bringing it on home here. Because we talk about a lot of the negatives, a lot of hauntings, a lot of spooky stuff, because that's what we like. But also, there's a lot of good that comes from these things too. And so, I'll ask you, Miss Eleanor, what are some of the more positive experiences you've had with spirits coming forward?
Aside from the paycheck, there's quite a lot. For instance, I have a cat sanctuary that I'm able to support, and with the help of those cats, I am able to sort of see into other realms, and I help to train the cats into seeing in other realms. As we all know, with ancient Egypt, cats are very, very informative when it comes to seeing into other universes.
So that answers the question we brought up at the top of the show. Do other animals, experience have the same kind of involvement experience? So that right there, cats.
Cats, yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
So
occasional ferret, but mainly cats.
Yeah, okay. I can see that.
And you mentioned the paycheck. I have to, I like to play the ponies from my bunker here. Have you ever, received any tips or anything from ghosts who might have some inside knowledge, or stock tips, but mostly horse races or gambling?
All I can tell you, sir, is that Seabiscuit was a cheater.
Wow.
Okay.
Yeah, that's the one piece of information that's ever come over from the other side, other than, oh God, ouch.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's.
Well,
I guess
vans won't airbrush themselves. What can I say?
Exactly. It is a pink VW.
I knew it. And I wanted to ask you too, the Fredericks of Hollywood pumps. Those were the ones with the marabou.
Of course.
Yeah,
they match my Captain Delish.
Yeah, of course.
Those are great.
It's girl talk.
I mean, I've heard they're great. I bet
we'll send some to your bunker. You can try them out firsthand.
So along with a signed autographed copy of my book, sir.
Of course.
Yeah, I hope there are some good recipes along with that book.
Send us your favorite recipes too. We love to collect those along with headshots and other accoutrements that our guests send us.
So
a lot of ghost peppers.
Before we wrap up and go to our reader mail, one thing that I like to always ask, guys, is for kind of common sense advice. So Miss Eleanor, what if someone has an encounter or an experience, what some just simple advice, like we talk about what do you do if you get attacked by a lion or a bear or a tiger, laying face down or shouting, running back.
Say, oh my.
Pardon?
You say, oh my.
Oh my, that's the ones. That's what you do
for lions, tigers, and bears.
Oh my,
those three, yes.
Okay, so but for ghosts, more in your direction, perhaps Poltergeist. If you have an experience, what would you recommend? Just simple instructions for someone saying, "Hey, man, I'm freaking out here." What would you recommend they do?
concentrate on your breathing. Make sure you have a level breath. If you're withholding oxygen from the environment, the entity itself will get a little frustrated because they too need to breathe. So maintain a certain level of breath and watch yourself breathing in. And other than that, think of happy places, think of flowers, think of cats, think of rainbows. And if you choose to engage, open yourself up. If not, think of the bright, fluffy things.
Right. Good energy brings other good energy. That's
true.
Okay.
That's
That's really great. And, I also want to throw that to, why don't we throw that to Dr. Semor, maybe on a more medical level, although breathing is pretty darn medical. But is there any additional advice, Dr. Semor, from a practical or a medical standpoint on what someone should do other than breathe? Or, that might just sum it up. I don't know.
I do, from a medical standpoint, highly encourage everyone at all times to breathe.
More good advice.
Simply stated. So I want to thank Dr. Eleanor Darkness for being on the show today.
Thank you.
Are just an absolute angel, and we appreciate you coming on and telling us all about this world that you call medium.
It was my pleasure. Farewell, my children.
Oh.
And thanks for coming on. And Dr. Semor, thanks again for joining us.
Always great to be here and great to learn while I am teaching.
So let's close up that.
Let's close up the bunker. We got that all bunk delay there. All right.
And we'll take a quick final break and be right back with our listener viewer mail.
Listeners, before we say goodbye today, I thought we would take an opportunity to read some more listener mail that we have.
Oh, I do love listener mail. Before we move forward, what is that? If people want to reach out, we have an email address, correct?
Yes, the email address is realtruefactsmail@gmail.com. You can also follow us on Instagram at realtruefactsgram. You can send us a DM. You can comment on any of the show info that you see. We post a lot of extra goodies there. So if you just can't get enough, give us a follow there and let us know what you think.
Okay. So what do we have this week, Barbara?
We got a couple messages today. We've got one question here that says, when are you guys going to do an episode on aliens?
That's like asking, when are you going to do an episode on humans?
When aren't we going to do an episode?
Yeah, I think we've mentioned aliens in probably every episode because
it all comes back to aliens.
Yeah, it's part of everyday life. Yeah, like I said, when are you going to do an episode about air, the clouds? Although we probably should address that at some point. But,
we probably should.
But yeah, okay. Maybe we'll look at. I think that's reasonable. But maybe look at talking about the different kinds of aliens and things.
They also said they loved the Secret Society episode.
Oh yeah, who doesn't?
Yeah, so that's great. Great comment. This one says, great show. You guys are always talking about bunkers, but where are you exactly? How far underground are you? Can you recommend a good bunker contractor?
Well, I unfortunately, as far as my location is concerned, I cannot disclose that. And as far as how deep, I'll just say, I'm deep enough, folks. I'm well deep.
Yeah, nice try. We can't tell you where we are. That's for a safety thing. How far underground? As deep as we can go, baby.
As deep as I can get.
And then,
right. Go ahead,
bunker contractor. Any good bunker, you build it yourself. So you have to do the research. You have to put the time in. You got to build it yourself.
Yes, that's an. I can't stress that enough. How great of a point that is. If you have someone else build your bunker, then they know too much.
Yeah, then they know.
Yeah, one of the few people I trust, Dr. Semor. I did tap into him for some advice. When it came to some of the math involved in structural analysis. But even with him, he's not aware of any of my final, my final construction, any of the final.
I got my blueprints off Reddit. No one really looks at that website, so
What
I
is
guess
it? It's called. What is it called? What's the website
called Reddit.
Reddit, like it's spelled READIT. Like I read that. Like I read it.
I guess, yeah. But I got my blueprints there.
Yeah. No, I asked because I want to check it out. It sounds like it could be a good resource.
Yeah, take a look. I thought maybe it was about the color, but no, I think you're right. It's about reading things.
Okay.
And that's it for the mailbag. Just a couple things here. What's this about aliens? When are you guys going to do an episode on aliens?
Right. Back to that.
When are we going to do an episode on aliens?
I think that's a perfectly good question. You know what? Now is next week. I think is as good a time as any to just to go neck deep in aliens. Just get. Why don't we
dig our claws into some aliens?
Right. So we may hone in on a particular type or event or something. But yeah, that's a good direction. We'll take that. I'd love to be able to read all the messages we get and go into every single question, but it's just unfortunately it's just not feasible with the volume of communications we get. But that shouldn't turn you off from reaching out on the Instagrams, the emails, leave messages on YouTube. Wait, we don't have a YouTube yet.
Not yet. We're getting there.
I mean, iTunes, leave a review and communicate there. Podbean. Yeah, so we try and have a lot of avenues for you to communicate with us. Because
anywhere podcasts are sold.
Yes, yeah, because, we're spending all this time communicating with you. We want to make it a two-way street.
Yeah. So we will do that. And so next week we'll be talking about aliens. If you have had an alien encounter, if you've seen any UFOs, any alien-y thing, shoot us an email, realtruefactsmail@gmail.com. Follow us on Instagram. Tell us your story. Chances are we'll feature it on the episode, and that will help us get farther into the real truth of it all.
Yeah, and at the end of the day, that's what we're here for.
It is. So thank you today and always, my dear listeners, for tuning in to Real True Facts, the Real True Podcast. Keep questioning your world, because just because you hear it or read it doesn't mean it's true. We will see you next time.